Hello there. I'm Richard Warner, and I'm an acting coach.
And I'm Erica Arvold. I'm a producer and a casting director.
And this session's idea, hopefully, is sort of fun. When I talk to Erica, and we have some wonderful, passionate conversations about acting over cups of tea and coffee, every once in a while she'll say, I really like that actor because he's playing in the same sandbox. And I've always wanted to ask her, so I'm going to ask her right in front of you, what that means. What do you mean by somebody's playing in the sandbox, the sandbox you're playing?
I'm meaning they're conversing on the same level as what is needed or whoever else is in the room. So in conversing, I mean on all aspects of that. I'm talking about their intellect, their pace, their quickness, the subject matter, and attuned nuance to the character that they're building or whatnot, and
sense of humor too, I would think.
Sense of humor, definitely. Sense of humor, yeah. And quickness. Actually, let me touch back on that one because quickness is really important because so many times it's, especially in a director's session, so many times a director will give a note. And directors are completely different, and that may be the first time this actor has ever interacted with the director at all. And getting a note's a great thing usually, right? Mm-hmm. But sometimes I've been with directors and they speak so quickly, or directors that are really slower and they're not talking the exact same language as the actor, which I know is the point of the audition, right? To learn that you have the same language or whatnot. But playing in the same sandbox really relates to that because it's immediately this, as soon as you get someone saying, let's say, you know what, no, I just meant like bigger. So as soon as you get that direction from someone, which definitely happens a lot, maybe not a lot, but it happens, and it's almost like you're checking out which sandbox are we going to play in first. You know?
Yeah.
Okay, how big's our sandbox here? What are we going to play with? What's the type of sand we're dealing with? And all these things have to be checked off. Then you get to start playing, which means the audition's happening and you're kind of working out. Then that's when you're playing. And then afterwards, sometimes you're like, oh yeah, I was playing in the same sandbox. Does that make sense?
It does. What I love about the metaphor is when I think back on my days of playing in a sandbox, I mean literally playing in the sandbox, there are a couple of things that I conjured. One is that how simple it is. You got sand and you got some really primitive toys like a plastic, those little colored you don't have a lot. It's not like Legos or, you really have to be inventive and imaginative. It's sort of primal, right? Mm-hmm. Well, that's what I love about that, some sense of that. Also the freedom that's there. There's some sense of that when you're playing in a sandbox, it is a range of imagination. You just can play, you have to start when you think about playing in the sand. It's not about something that's intricate. It's about something that's simple and clear and clean, and it requires imagination once again. So I love that metaphor, some sense of that. Well, I've got when we talk about the pragmatics, I want you to respond to the pragmatics, but before we do that, I was thinking this. One thing we've talked about all the time is all the steps in this wonderfully intimate, complicated relationship, which is casting. All the steps that a casting director's eye is looking at as we come into the room. And this is part of playing in the sandbox. Mm-hmm. And we break it down this way. What we've done in the past is break it down this way. And that is, you see the entrance, an actor's entrance. Mm-hmm. You then see what I call, you experience the introduction, which is that first encounter, that interesting human thing, which is that first encounter when somebody's talking to you for the first time, that first impression's involved in there. And that's followed by the next, I think, element of any audition, and that is what I call the perusal. And that might include the question and answer session. That's what you're talking about when you get the tools out of how you're going to play, searching for vocabularies. And then finally the reading itself, the body of the work. And then two very, very important ones, which is the wrap-up, what's happening right afterwards and where that next transition into how we're going to solve finishing this up. And then finally the exit. Some sense of that. So, can we talk about each one of those?
Absolutely.
So, what are you looking for when an actor walks through the door in the entrance? What are some things? Just vamp on that for us a little bit.
Confidence.
Cool.
Confidence, absolutely. A sense of they're here for purpose, professional. I want someone to walk through the door that I know will walk through, that will arrive on set be great in their dressing room, arrive prepared for their work. There's just a confidence is really probably the best word. You probably have a better word for it when they arrive, to know that they're serious about their craft.
It's confidence.
It's a job.
It truly is confidence. I might have some ideas on how one gets confidence even from the get-go, and it really has something to do with your preparation. But let's go on a little bit too.
Yeah, it does. And there's overconfidence too, so I don't want to.
And there's fake confidence and real confidence.
Yes, absolutely.
Truthful confidence, because I've been in both.
And then that's a giveaway as to which sandbox you're in.
Yes, exactly.
So if that real confidence comes in, at least my definition of real confidence, then I'm like, okay, great, we can play in the sandbox today.
Yes.
But if that fake confidence comes in, I'm like, okay, I don't love that sandbox. I'll play with you for a minute, but I don't love that sandbox.
Yeah. And then, as you do, what all good casting directors do is try to get you into the sandbox with the director.
That's true.
Yeah,
I don't turn off that easily. Sometimes I feel like I do, but I always try.
So we've made an entrance, and it's confident and expressive, and it looks like we're ready to play. Now we have this introduction, and this is that first impression. So where does your eye go? Where does your casting sensitivities, where do your artistic sensibilities go in those moments where one opens themselves up to you for the first time?
Yeah. My instinct, and I may be unique or the same as other casting directors, I don't know, because I've never actually had this discussion with another casting director, but my first instinct is to figure out what that actor's approach or method is. And because what I want to do is help them do their best audition by respecting what their approach is. And some actors, and for me, I think it's pretty much split down the middle, to be honest, but some actors really need to talk first, so they can kind of acclimate to the room and feel safe, and then are able to do their best work. And some actors are in character, they've done their preparation outside, and they're ready to go. And actually, if I insist on talking, they're gonna not maybe do their best audition because they'll be off track, or especially if there are accents involved, sometimes period work. There's, in some actors, because I know them so well, actually have a variety of approaches depending on what's required in that work.
Yeah. So if you're doing a really bad guy, a villain, a good actor might have an approach where they built a whole imaginary, circumstance that they really want to bring into the room because they need that in order to get that work done. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's funny because one of our other talks is about persona, and I think that sometimes when the character is so separate from someone's persona, that amount of prep and work that's really right there, they have to dive right into the audition. So when the dialogue starts, I usually say something, and I've definitely heard that in other offices as well, something like, okay, do you want to chat for a bit, or do you want to get right to it? And the very casual question, if someone's playing in the same sandbox that I'm starting in, they'll be like, I'm going to get right to work. Or like, oh no, let's chat. I think that would be great. It's an immediate, that's my check-in. It's like the subtext is I'm saying, how do you work? And their subtext back is, I work this way. But then then I know. And if they don't know that that's the subtext, then I know that too. And we're just in a little different sandbox than I had thought we were in. And then I shift to the other sandbox,
And so one that might need chat, you would be talking about what you're picking up off their picture and resume.
Exactly. And I love, I think conversation starters, of course, are some special skills and other work that one has done. And it's really always very, very nice, I could go on and on about this, to talk about, things other than acting or dancing or singing. That's to really understand the person,
yes,
the whole
exactly.
person. And that's what in order to do my craft, that's what I would love to know.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move on to, now they're going to the body of work. And that's an interesting transition that I always like coaching, which is moving off of that introduction and entering into the work. What's your eye pick up about playing in a sandbox, about an actor who is now moving from their own persona, depending on how deep they are within that in the conversation, into the work itself, which might be really new.
Yeah, I notice really specific things sometimes, especially if I know my director well, which is usually the case, and how they like to work with actors. And so what I feel like my job, if I'm alone, if it's not a director session, if it's just me, I like to really give the actor as much information as possible so that if they do get a callback for the director, they're prepared for that director's style of directing. And the transition into the text, if you will, from the conversation usually is at a specific pace, and it's really apparent to me when it's slower or when it's much quicker. And that informs me of how they're going to work with the director, because, you know, for instance, genres actually come into play. Quick commercial, it doesn't mean quick is not feature film at all, but that lends itself to it. In slower, you know, is not necessarily always a great thing, because, you know, you got to be ready, but then I just usually know that they're a little greener, they need a little more time or whatnot, and I just know that. So when, let's just say that actor is brought to a director, when there are, you know, 2 people or 3 people up for the role, slowness isn't going to necessarily hold someone back, but I just know pragmatically that actor is going to need a certain amount of preparation time, etc. And I might even push to say, you know what, let's decide on this character today, because I know in order for that actor to get the role right and perform on set, they're going to need, let's say it's a commercial shooting in 2 days, they're going to need all 2 days to prep to be on set.
So it really is even about tempo rhythms there as well, from some sense of that. And I can see where you talk about genre choices too, you know, how one moves a script along, you know. If you really study it, each particular really outstanding TV show has its own distinctive rhythm. You
Absolutely.
know, Homicide, Life on the Streets, and even if you stay within the same genre, it's going to be very different than The Wire in a lot of ways, because of the writing, because of this.
Okay, so you're speaking of television shows, so I just remembered one very practical tip for any actor out there auditioning ever for a television show, especially one that's on the air. Watch it before you audition for it. I can't tell you, I was a casting associate on a show called Providence many years ago, and I cannot tell you the number of actors that had never seen the show before coming in. And there was this really fun, some of the characters were dead, or one of the characters was dead, and all the other characters were alive, and then some of the characters owned pets, and there was kind of this little bit of a heightened thing. And not knowing that, you got to know the sandbox.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to get back to that. It's one of my maxims. I tell actors that I work with that if they do their homework, a bit of research like that, they will probably be in the top 15% of actors that are seen. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely agree.
All you have to do is do your homework, and you're already in the top 15%. Now, it's a bit sad in a way, but that is a tip that I love actors would just do that, simply do that. Now, the reasons why actors don't do, this is another topic entirely, gang, why you don't do your homework. Some of them are really deeply, if you will, psychological. You know, I'm not going to do my homework because then I'll review my best work and I'll get rejected again. So there's a whole bunch of covering that goes on wherein an actor doesn't do his or her best work. Topic for another one, because I want to move on to this. Yeah, to save that one. So this is really now we're moving from the body of work in that sandbox and your perceptions of it now to the wrap up. Moving out of that, and what gets that at? What are you looking for? What does your eye pick up in that sandbox as an actor moves from that work and makes an exit out into the world again?
I think one of the hardest things to witness as well as perhaps perform is an incredibly dramatic scene, and crying and snot flying out and moaning, into then, okay, my audition's over. That's hard for a viewer. I mean, I'm sure it's very, very hard for a performer. But the transition that one makes out is amazing. It's like your Meryl Streep story that you tell in your class. You know, watching that come out of that realm, just to say thank you and not be completely exhausted, depleted, or take it on personally. I look for that little bit layer of, you're like, you know what, I can remove myself from this. And now, and coupled with that is there is an openness, and I think this comes from a philosophy or a practice that one has, an openness for potential changes or direction that is not preconceived, and no one's disappointed that they don't get a direction, and no one's disappointed that, you know, myself included, that there is a direction. You know, it's like it's really interesting. And so that moving out of the material, and then let's just say I'm like, you know what, that was great, let's do it one more time. So I do a lot. I play a lot, because playing in the sandbox more and more, I am able to realize what sandbox we're in too. You know, it helps me.
But keep that in mind. I want to get back to that, what Erica just said there. Very, very important, I think, in our work in playing the sandbox. I'll keep going, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but that moment in which I do say that direction, okay, that was great, but let's do it one more time. When I see someone have the thought, I didn't get it right. Turn off, we're playing.
That's right.
We're playing.
Yeah, this is really, really to one of my points. Now, exit out. This this is perfect for me in the sense of something I've been recently talking to actors about in this particular moment, which is the exit out of the material is very, very important. And it cannot. We're looking for ways that make it not self-conscious, but also very creative and productive. It's in some ways, without being too precious with the word, it is a sacred moment. I use that word. It's a moment of interesting mystery for everyone. If you're doing really, really good work, the fantasy for most actors is just there's a stillness in the room.
Yes.
And that's what I mean, the sacredness. That every good casting director I know and director respects that moment. That something good has really happened to this word, true artistry. And they're going to respect that. And if you can live in that unselfconsciously and then do this, which is, come on, play with me. This is what I'm offering you. You got something. So it's not, this is mine and stay away and it's special. It's like, here it is. Here's what I've been thinking. What do you think about that? So that next dive in, can you do this again? How about this? Is such a gift. Now you're playing. I think now you're playing in the sandbox.
Exactly. And even coming out of that first one, in that moment, being able to hold that moment. There are so many, less seasoned actors, if you will, that as soon as that last word's out of their mouth, they go, okay, done, okay. And it's like, wait, I was there. I needed a moment. Right. I needed that sacred moment.
Yeah, and that's very important too, because I call it popping out. So they do a great moment. Oh, thank you. And it's, no, you've established, I'm buying the frame of reality you've given me. I am moving into that with a sense of truth and belief. And if you just yank me out of that, you've left me really vulnerable. And some people get angry. They actually get angry when you do that. For me, it's just like, oh, please don't do that. That was so good. What are you doing there? So now let's talk about the final element, which is the exit.
The exit. So
making a good, classy exit.
Yeah, here's the other just piece of advice, and it seems completely commonsensical, but I'll say it. When someone in the room, whether the producer, director, casting director, whomever, says thank you, that means we're done. You may leave now. It doesn't mean you were bad. It doesn't mean you were good. It doesn't mean you're getting the part. It doesn't mean you're not getting the part. It doesn't mean anything other than truly thank you for doing your work, and now we have someone else to see. That's it. So many people do not know that word thank you means, oh, now I may exit.
It's a wonderful, clear way of just leaving. So you can pick up your bag and get out of there too. Now, for me, it's interesting, too, because when I direct in theater, I haven't done as much film, the exits are really interesting. To watch an actor actually exit out of a room after they've done good or bad work, there's so much information in the whole essence of an actor when they actually leave that room.
Yeah, it's true, because you can imagine, some actors literally run.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm thinking, that's... I'm sorry I put you through that. Do you want to do that again?
Was that so painful?
Yeah, was that so painful? I don't know if this is the career for you. And, some actors kind of, I got to get my stuff and get organized and take a really long time. And I'm kind of, okay, come on, here we go. There's something about just being efficient. I think it's just really, it's the bookend to the arrival. And so you just, if you've got those 2 points. Also, that's the last impression. Last impressions are huge. They're secondary to first impressions. So
absolutely, indeed. Oh, that's interesting. That's a great one. So there's sort of a step-by-step romp through the elements in playing in the sandbox. So I'll leave them with some pragmatics. Okay. I've been thinking about this, fun ones, just for you to think about. I think one of the first sort of pragmatics is bring your own toys to the sandbox, but make sure they complement whoever's playing with you. And by bring your own toys, I mean prepare.
Don't bring a
just as
huge 6-foot shovel when I have a little bitty one.
Prepare, find out what that sandbox is so that you can bring the proper toys to play in it, some sense of that. My second sort of pragmatic is dig in the sand, don't sit in the sun. And by that I mean dig in the sand is that what you should do, and this is a tricky one, and it takes some practice, is that you have to, and all actors talk about this that have gone on and experienced, is that I take all my preparation and I let it go. I just let it go and I start to play. And that's what I mean. If you're going to sit in the sun of all your preparation, you're probably not going to be as spontaneous or present as you might be if you really, really take that deep, courageous dive to dig in the sand. To really do it right there, because they're going to appreciate that. Even if you're making a mistake, if you're going to make a bold, by mistake I mean a misinterpretation of the role even, I think that's going to intrigue a casting director and director more, which is,
the way one handles a mistake is so telling. It's actually more telling than not making a mistake. And I love, especially, it actually doesn't matter who's in the room, frankly, when someone realizes they've, made some kind of, flub or they weren't in it completely or something. I mean, you can see the shift without even starting over sometimes. You can just see the shift and go like, whoom, right in there. And then sometimes when they come out, they're like, you know what? I'm, the top of the scene isn't really what I had intended. And I'm like, you know what? I saw it. Let's do it again. And that's also a conversation to have. You got to really know you're in that same sandbox to have conversations like that. But when you are in the same sandbox, they're completely appropriate.
Yeah, because then you're working together. So the next tenet for me in this playing the sandbox is you don't build a sandcastle alone. So that's sort of my maxim. That's what you're talking about, that. Right? So you can build a pretty sandcastle, but if you're not savvy to what's also other people, and I think what we forget as actors, I do all the time, is that everyone in that room is in a hunt. Everyone is. We forget that. We somehow project on us that we're the only one that's on the spot. I always know when I leave is that directors are hunting with their casting directors, looking for that perfect person. There's a lot of question marks. Everyone's playing in the sand, digging in it. There's not a sense that it's pat or set, especially at the higher reaches. So that if you can come in and know that if you're going to build a pretty sandcastle metaphorically for them and not be aware of what's going on, what you're talking about, then it's not going to be as good as this. Here's my next pragmatic, which is dig for buried treasure together. And I'll leave it there, which is there's got to be some buried treasure that you're going to find. One of the things that I sometimes have been complimented, it's happened a couple of times in my life, is I know I've done a really good job in an audition. One I know I marked for sure. I did something very particular, physical and specific in an audition. I didn't get the role. But when I saw the commercial on TV, that thing was done. And I always thought what happened was that the director went, that's good. I'm going to give it to this other actor. So in some ways, Erica has always said this, which is a sense of what we're talking about is the creative process of casting. And sometimes actors forget that it actually is a sandbox, a creative process, where everyone is working, and if anything, more intensely with a greater sense of freedom and imagination than when you're on the set. In many ways.
In many ways, you're right. And that actually applies to your arrival. Because if you know that when you're about to arrive into an office to audition, and know that this is a sandbox, and we're here to figure out, explore, we're wild explorers, then that's a great, kind of confident psychology to walk in with.
So, I'll end by saying that I really want Eric to write a book about all this and call it Playing in the Same Sandbox.
Okay, I'm up for it, okay.
So, leading question to end this session, that is this one. That we hope that by this time you have questions for us. So my leading question is, what's on your mind? Is there anything on your mind that you would like us to talk about? Is there something that here's your opportunity to talk to a casting director, somebody that's willing to share her expertise after years and years of working at the highest levels. So please, email us, contact us, and we will see if we can find a way to answer your questions that you have out there about the casting process, about acting in general. Have a good week.